Welcome, citizens of the globe, to the Frontend Heroes podcast, where we discuss all things villainous and heroic about the front end of software development. My name is Evan Payne. I'm a senior front-end developer at Actimo, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Scott Francis, a senior front-end engineer at Porsche. How you doing, Scott?
Yeah, really good, thanks. I've got a change of scenery here. I've actually got my apartment back, basically because the kids have gone down to the beach, because thankfully, summer's here. So it's super amazing.
Yeah, I need to go down to the beach. The others have been, family has been. I have not yet. I will make some time tomorrow. Today's episode is sponsored by NetCentric, an award-winning Adobe Global Alliance partner and consultancy headquartered in Switzerland with offices all over Europe as well as Pune, India. They are currently hiring for a number of roles, so if you're looking, check them out. We are, as ever, so glad to have their support with this show. So this time around, we have a guest. Her name is Cassie Evans. She is known as lead bestower of animation superpowers at Greensock, speaker, educator, SVG Magician. Cassie, how are you doing? And if you don't mind giving us a little spiel intro on to how you got into this crazy front-end world.
Cool. Hi. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. Little spiel intro into how I got into the front-end world. I guess when I was a lot younger, I got into coding. So I was doing MySpace profiles, custom MySpace profiles, and Neopets pages and stuff like that when I was very young. Mostly because my parents wouldn't give me money for the tuck shop, so I used to swap custom MySpace pages and sparkly cursors for donuts from the tuck shop. So that was like the early days, and then I just kind of didn't do much coding for quite a while. I studied photography and then worked in bars for quite a long time, and then kind of found my way again. I got into my late 20s and realized that I couldn't just work in bars and go to festivals all the time, and I needed to have an actual career. So it was a little bit of a roundabout route into development.
In fairness, some people have found a way to do that. I guess that's the power of the internet and Instagram influencers and things like that. Nice. So the episode title, and this maybe one isn't a stretch, which sometimes it is, keeping with our superhero motif, is the Bizzarro DOM, referencing, I hope, how the code that you write within an SVG tag is almost like the rest of the DOM in a Bizzarro world kind of way. And, those that know what Greensock is know that it is a very powerful tool, and there's a lot of stuff that's based off of SVG, and you've done a lot with SVG, so I want us to talk about that. So I guess the first thing is, when did you start gravitating towards using that as opposed to, Canvas or other stuff? Or how do you decide what to reach for when you're making these interesting and cool things that you make?
So yeah, as well as the bar job, I was also doing design work as well. So I was trying to do freelancing, which wasn't very successful. So I did a lot of pub work at the same time. But I did design for quite a few years. So I had quite a lot of experience in that area. So when I started learning how to code, I think I was more interested in the visual side of things. And then when I found out that you could export out SVG graphics from Illustrator and then kind of dig into that code, it just seemed like a really exciting way to get started for me. Because if you're playing around with CSS animation, you'd have to build a whole website first, and there's a lot of things to learn before you can get into the animating bit. So right at the beginning of learning how to code, the fact that I could create a graphic in Illustrator and then export that out and have like a ready-made kind of fun starting place to play around with, that was really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember finding the plugin, or I don't know exactly what you'd call it, but called Body Movin', which was you could do some stuff in After Effects, and then you could render that out, and then it would be, you could use it to kind of work with Lottie. And there was this whole like tool chain around it, but you could build something in an animation software that you were used to, and then have it be sort of running on the web. That was also super powerful and had the same sort of vibe as that, of getting a lot closer to what you're used to using to design with or build something with, and then ending up in this complicated web stuff.
Yeah, I think body moving and Lottie, it's great if your experience with animation is After Effects, because you can kind of stay within what you know. So a lot of people ask me, what's best if I want to animate SVG? What's better to use? Is it Lottie, or is it Greensock, or is it CSS? And I think it obviously is always, the answer is always it depends. Yeah. But if you've got a team of people who don't do coding and they do lots of After Effects stuff, it's quite a useful tool.
So was your entry into this then like a graphic design point of view? Like it was you never really intended to go like into the web, or it wasn't like, I know you mentioned that you were making like MySpace like CSS stuff, which you said, and this is quite depressing. You said, "Oh, like when I was young, I remember touching MySpace, and I was not young." I was like, I think I was like 19 or 20 or something like that. So, but yeah, it was. So you kind of left that behind, but then was it with one eye on like you through education you were going to go into graphic design, or and the web kind of like you collided with the web because of this?
I think I was already trying to do design because at university I did design and photography, but I was really struggling trying to get freelance work, and I think my initial drive was, what if I did web design? That's narrowing it down more. If I learn about designing for the web, then maybe I'll be able to get those kind of jobs. And it seemed like there were a lot of people that I knew who were going into tech at that time. So I was looking into that, but then I just got sucked into the coding bit. It just was that was where all the fun was, I think. And then now I'm here.
Yeah. It was quite a successful leap. Like it was, yeah. I think it's a super interesting path. I mean, like it's interesting as well that you say like that people you knew were going into tech, which I still think people are like really like looking to switch careers and stuff. And you see like code boot camps and things like that which are really like taking off, and lots of subscriptions to that. I think what interests me really, like I see parallels with yourself and my sister. Actually, she was like design photography at university, and then like, but her passion was magazines, which now she's finding like it was just like a dying industry, and now but the thing that she's gone into really is making like short video clips, like so you'll see like video adverts and things like that, and she's really putting those things together. I was suggesting to her, why don't you go into tech? Like you're a really great designer. Like why don't you migrate? So yeah, I see like lots of parallels there with you and her.
Yeah, I mean, I like the main thing that I studied when I was at university was photography, and that was like the fact that when I was studying, we were studying mostly like film cameras, and there was one place that you could buy film from. I grew up in South Africa, so this was in Johannesburg. But there was one place that you could buy film from, and during my course that place shut down, so we had to import our film from overseas because that whole industry was just collapsing, and it was so expensive because obviously the South African exchange rate. So if you had an assignment, you were like, please come out right. I've only got one go at this, I can't use another roll of film. But yeah, that was kind of foreshadowing.
Yeah, no wonder you went into a digital realm where you could actually you make many mistakes correctly.
All the other students were like, oh, I'm going out this weekend for drinks. And I was like, I can't. I've got to buy film.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this many times, and I even talk about it with my parents sometimes. I'm like, I am so grateful to be working in a digital realm where if I make a mistake, it's not a big deal. I can just undo or like stash the commit or whatever. Oh, it's such a relief, and it opens you up to that creativity. You get rid of that fear of failure. That is part of it. I want to segue just a tiny bit into some more practical matters, and so. Those that have checked out some of your work, I mean, I remember when you relaunched your website recently, and there was an adorable animation that was there, and it was immediately like, how did you do that? And I'm sure you've answered it before, but maybe just to kind of walk us through what the process even is. Like, where do you start to imagine that that's what you want to do? That's harder, I know, creative spark. But then practically, like, where do you build your assets? How do you apply the animation? What kind of tools do you use for all of that?
Cool. So the first thing that I'd like to mention when it comes to my website is a lot of people, when I launched it, were saying like, oh, your site's so lovely, and I wish I had like the motivation to get my personal site done, and my personal site's just been sitting in a folder half done for years, and I can't seem to manage to finish it. So I was furloughed because of COVID, so I had nothing but time, which was kind of why it is so lovely. So I always like to mention that, because I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves in this industry to do full-time jobs and also learn on the side and also have side projects and stuff. So yeah, if you're still struggling, that's fine. But yeah, practically wise, I make all of my SVG assets. I used to use Illustrator, but I've recently kind of migrated to Affinity Designer, just because you don't get locked into the Adobe Mafia pricing structure. So it's like a once-off payment. I can't remember how much it is now, but yeah, it's and it's very intuitive as well. I've been using it teaching people in my SVG workshops, and everyone seems to kind of click with it a lot faster. So yeah, I'll make assets in Affinity Designer, make sure that you label everything really clearly, because then when you export it, SVG code can be quite lengthy. And if you don't label things properly, you can spend ages trawling through it trying to figure out which path is which. So labeling stuff is very important. And then animation wise, I got started doing SVG animation with CSS. And I think that's still a really good place to get started and kind of get your head around it. But I always use Greensock for production, just because Greensock, well, lots of reasons, but the main one being that they put a lot of work into making sure that SVG transforms behave consistently cross-browser. So there's quite a few bugs that you kind of come into with SVG, and transforms and Greensock manage quite a lot of them. So
yeah, I have run into those myself. I was working on a project where it was a big Angular project, and I was like, hey, this timeline thing, this interactive thing in the bit with all these little like bubbles, and you can drag them around and stuff. And it had a graph behind it. I was like, we can do this all with SVG. The graphs are SVG. Let's do the whole thing as a big interactive SVG. And it worked, but it was just all like, that was a big SVG, like not just a big SVG, but a dynamic SVG. So things were being pushed into the DOM and stuff with Angular, and it did work. But we had this one bug on Internet Explorer because the transform on the SVG element, the translate, whatever, didn't do anything or did the wrong thing. And it was really hard to track that down, figure it out. And I do wish I had gone for some sort of third-party library maybe to make that easier. We've got it in the end, but yeah, working directly with it can be really hard at times.
Yeah, I think a lot of the confusion...
No, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think a lot of the confusion is to do with the center of rotation of transforms with SVG. So DOM elements always rotate around their center, whereas SVG elements rotate either around the top left-hand corner of the SVG canvas or the top left-hand corner of the element itself, depending on what browser you're in. I think it's usually the SVG canvas. There's a property called fillbox now, like reasonably new CSS property, and that allows you to set the center of transform to either the element or the canvas. So that's really good, because when I started animating SVG with CSS, that wasn't supported. I think it was just proposed. So it was, a little bit more difficult to animate SVG, whereas now we've got that and it's in most browsers. So yeah, that's good going forward.
When you're working with Greensock, I mean, I've worked with it like once or twice. I forget exactly what I was doing. I think I was trying to build some custom image loader where I broke the image down into, I rendered it in the backend in Go into some sort of like triangles, like a bunch of triangles in SVG to, you have that kind of, it's almost the same shape. And then I moved all those triangles into squares and put them in a row. And so like as it was loading, it would draw the squares in. And then when it was done, it would animate them into place. And just trying to go from the triangle to the square was really hard. But then I used Greensock to sort of make that whole thing a lot easier. But is it the case that you just kind of sprinkle it in? Like for those that haven't even gone in near and tried it yet, like how does it fit into the workflow?
It depends, I guess, on what your workflow is. But yeah, most projects that I use Greensock on, I kind of tend to use a mixture of Greensock and CSS, because I think that there's some things that CSS animations are really good for, like very simple hover states, like very simple transitions from one place to another. So I wouldn't say that you have to go all in on Greensock. It is a tool that makes your life easier, and I think that that's the key thing. Is I held off from doing JavaScript animation for so long when I was learning, because when everyone talked about it, they talked about, it's a really powerful tool and it can handle really complex animations, and powerful and complex makes you think difficult. So it was a little bit intimidating, but I think it actually isn't difficult. It is powerful and it allows you to do complex things, but it allows you to do complex things because it is so intuitive and simple to use. So it's just an animation tool that makes your life easier, really. It allows you to chain animations together, and it gives you control in a kind of global sense over your animations. So you can get a timeline and you can say, hey, I want this whole timeline to speed up, or I want it to slow down, or I want it to play in reverse when this thing's clicked, or I want it to trigger an event at the end of the timeline, or I want it to play 3 times and then speed up. You can pretty much do whatever you want.
Yeah, I really like those parts of it as well. It's this idea of, you can roll that yourself, you can write that yourself, but you got to figure out the math, and you got to figure out, how close to the frame per second rate you're hitting and all of that. And it just gets really tedious and easy to make mistakes. And I don't know. We talk a lot on the show about abstractions, and I think that modern software development is about finding the right abstractions. And this one hits a good spot for talking about animation in a way that's easy to grasp. Like you said, like, this is my timeline. I want to chain these things together, and I want to be able to then just reverse this one and so on. Like, having these chainable methods to do that. That's a super, like you say, it's a very powerful tool, but it's more a helpful tool, which is cool. Scott, have you played around with this at all?
No. As usual, like it's something that I haven't used. Like it always seems to be the way. But I'm actually interested in. I think there's several things about the web and that seem like to be barriers for people. And I think that like animation done well is really one of those for me. I think lots of people. I cast my mind back to when I first saw like Flash or something like that, and saw that I could make a circle go like turn into a square, and like
Tween.
being blown, like tween two shapes, and I think it was like amazing. But it had no real value, and I think because it was just animation done badly. And I think what I'd really be interested in is like whether you think that tools like this have actually enabled people to do like better animations, like without necessarily understanding like what makes a good animation. I think that it just seems to me like there's so much behind like creating something good and effective and having subtlety and the impact that you want it to have. And people just not really like getting that and just really like diving for a tool like Greensock and thinking, oh well, it's there, so I'm going to use it. How would you advise people to handle that? How would you advise people to like really make impactful animations?
I think going back to what you said about whether I think Greensock has helped people make better animations, I think that it has definitely helped people make more performant animations, but Greensock isn't prescriptive. You know, it's the thing that I love the most about it. There's loads of animation frameworks out there that are like, you know, will help you fade these things in and fade those things out in a bouncy way or something. But Greensock allows you to do anything. So it's a lot more creative and a lot less prescriptive. So unfortunately, I think that means that there's probably a lot more people out there using Greensock to make everything whiz around with no thought for consequences. But I do tend to, in my animation workshops, talk about motion design principles as well. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head what the motion design principle is in my workshop. Can I look it up? We're on a podcast. Do you edit the things?
Yeah, it's fine. I don't really edit it, but we can talk while you're looking it up.
Fine, yeah. It's just a conversation.
Oh, I've remembered. Yeah. It's do not distract from salient information. So that's my favorite one. And I think if you keep that in mind, do not distract from salient information, then, you know, animation kind of comes secondary to that. So if you think about the main reason that people are on the site is for the content, you don't necessarily want to be animating all of the content in as you're scrolling down the page. You want to be animating things that support the content.
I also think we should change the episode name to that.
Do not distract from salient information.
Nice. We should just flash it out on Twitter as a warning.
That's one of those indie comic books with some sort of like, my superpower is melting cheese. Nice. No, it makes me think as well. This, you know, you say that it's not always done well, but it's one of those other things that front-enders often have to know about, but it is very hard to conceive of, right? It is in this weird gray zone where designers don't always have that in mind. You know, they often don't have to worry about moving images, and even in like design school, they might have that as a course, but not everyone has to take it. It's sort of like on top of the existing core material of what design school would be. And those that are self-taught might have picked it up, might have not. It feels like one of those things where you're not necessarily going to be very confident in it, certainly not in terms of putting it together. The same way as you might not be putting together what the API, like Swagger file, should be as a front-ender. You can help with it, you can kind of conceive of it, and if you're given it, you can implement it, right? But to actually start with a blank page and go ahead and decide what's best, that's a whole nother skill set, which we don't often have.
I mean, I think this goes into the whole front end devs being asked to have too many skill sets bucket because it's that article that Chris Hoyer wrote ages ago, isn't it, about the front of the front end and the back of the front end and the void, the great divide. And I think that we do expect everyone to have every skill, and I don't have every skill. I'm much more front of the front end, so I'm really comfortable with the animation stuff. I'm really comfortable with CSS. I'm really comfortable talking to designers in language that both of us can understand. Not super comfortable with setting up Webpack files. Don't really understand anything about Docker.
Yeah, I think that's true for most people, honestly.
Yeah, nobody,
even those that claim
nobody
to.
does.
Yeah,
Nobody does.
No one understands Webpack. They just put it on the CV. Like, well, nobody really understands it. If it runs, it runs.
Yeah, I've been at a conference at like having beers with the people that created Webpack and stuff, and even they have a hard time explaining it succinctly. That's a sign. They're great people, though. So no offense meant.
That's good to know. That's reassuring.
Yeah. I don't think there's going to be a solution for it other than like bringing awareness to it, and it's that kind of thing of, okay, if you're working at a company and you know that you've gotten things in line enough with your product to say, like, let's start doing some motion design. You can't always expect your front ender to do that. There is going to be maybe someone that you bring in that is maybe an expert in that, at least in setting up the initial things. And then your front enders can learn to implement it, and they can use tools like Greensock. That's great as well. And you'll find a unicorn every now and then that can do the whole thing. Great. Good, more power to you. Still, it's fun. Yeah, go ahead.
It's part of the ever-expanding industry, right? Like, I think the more that people see, like, good animation, and this is true for many things, but obviously, like, we're talking about animation now. But the more people see it done well, I think then you would start to see the need for people to come into teams and specifically like focus on these things, because like with the web maturing, it becomes more and more important for these things to be right. And definitely big companies are gonna like look at this and say, well, actually we need an expert to do this. So maybe like you don't have somebody who's on one product, like solely responsible for animation on one product, but they come in and they have several like portfolios, several products at the same time. But they're definitely responsible for it, because if you want it to be impactful, you want it to be done well, then bring in somebody who knows how to do it. I mean, like, that's the whole thing with the web. We can all technically like have a go at it and do it, but like if you want it done well and you want it done performance and you want it to really like hit home, then get someone with the proper skills.
Yeah, definitely. I always get so many questions in my workshops about how to do animation well in big companies, and I always feel quite privileged, because my main bit of advice is just like communication between designers and developers, but it's because I worked at Clearleft for so long, and it's a small company. So if we wanted animation on a site, like I could just sit down with the designer and we'd just have a bit of back and forth of the designer saying, well, I want to do something like this. And then I'd say, well, we can do these kind of things. And then we'd kind of brainstorm and come up with something. But I think it's a lot harder in bigger organizations, because maybe there isn't as comfortable a handoff between design teams and developing like the animations that they've thought up.
Yeah, I do think that that's getting better. I think people have understood that there needs to be these smaller units that are doing this sort of primary work, and thus this communication can happen. It's not everywhere. Like, organizations are playing catch up, but like Scott and I both worked for a kind of consultancy, and we did see, well, I think we saw over time the acknowledgement that that is a better way to work when possible. Obviously, it's not always, but yeah, one of the best projects I ever worked on, the designers, even though they were third party and we were third party, we were working with the client, we were working with these third-party designers on this core team, and we had stand-ups together and design handoffs every couple of weeks. It was very, very good for collaboration. I think that's good advice. Another topic I want to discuss, because I've been kind of reapproaching a sort of burnout phase, and not necessarily burnout, but I guess just, self-care in this industry. So we already have talked about like kind of semi-unrealistic expectations at times. But then, in general, like, this is a question to both of you. I mean, what strategies do you have to sort of not push yourself too hard and to keep yourself sane when there's all of these requirements that are just like knocking at your door constantly? Does that make sense?
It does.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go. It's a big question, and first of all, I'd like to say, Evan, like take it easy. If you're coming to if you think you're getting towards burnout, just take a step back. Please don't do it. No, I mean, I think in the last year has been difficult, obviously for many reasons, and like both you and I haven't changed companies during this last year, and so I think it's added pressure. Definitely, it's added pressure because you have the thing where you start a new company, you want to actually impress, so you probably take on a bit more than you perhaps should. I've really tried not to do that with this move, but I think it's kind of inevitable. So for me, the biggest cut off, as I've mentioned before, is basically at the end of each day I have to go and get the kids from school, and so work finishes. There isn't any, but okay, full disclosure. Just recently, I have been putting the kids to bed and then going back to work. It's happened a few times. I think you just need to be aware of your limitations. Be hyper aware of it. Be really understand that, going back to it, we're in an industry where you do releases. If you make a mistake, they can get fixed. It's not like we work in a print industry or something like that, and we've suddenly signed off, printed hundreds of thousands of copies of a book and realized that we've made a terrible error. Right. It's fixable. So I think the great thing about our industry is that you get the chance to fix a mistake. So it's not really like life or death. Well, it's not definitely not life or death, is it? Definitely isn't. I don't know whether that's a strategy, to have children to force you to stop work. but that's my strategy. They force me to start. They force me to work harder so I can get more money for them, and then they force me to stop so I retain my health.
Sounds like a very expensive and stressful strategy to inflict upon yourself.
I realize the error of my ways immediately.
I have a dog, and that's enough. That's enough responsibility. I think this industry is particularly bad for burnout, and because we have to learn so much stuff, and there's just so much pressure. I think the industry's greatest feature is also its worst curse. And I mean, the main reason that I got into tech, the jazzy story that I told earlier is it's all the Neopets and the whatever, and I was inspired and stuff. The main reason is because I was older. I was late 20s, and I didn't really want to go back to uni. My first career choice wasn't working out, and I felt like I had limited options, and tech was an option that I felt like if I knuckled down and just learnt things, there were lots of supportive kind of systems in place. There's loads of non-profit initiatives that help women and underrepresented groups get into tech, and lots of free resources online. So I was like, if I just knuckle down and learn this stuff, then I can get into the industry. And I think a lot of people are doing that, but that means that we've got a lot of people in this industry who, the majority maybe don't have degrees that are coming in, and everyone feels like they have to try and set themselves apart from the other people. And they don't have, if people don't have computer science degrees, how are they going to do that? They're going to do it with side projects. They're going to do it with social media. They're going to do it with podcasting or Twitch streaming or writing a blog or all of these other things. And people see everyone doing all of that stuff and they think that that means that they have to do all of it. And I know that I have felt like I've had to do all of it a lot of the time. And I think just acknowledging whether you're doing things for yourself or whether you're performing for other people is a very important one for me. So I've started asking myself that when I say yes to things. I'm like, am I saying yes to this because I want to do it? Or am I saying yes to this because I feel like the other person wants me to do it or some external person wants me to do it?
Yeah, that's really good. And I brought it up, one, because, I do personally like to talk these things through to remind myself. If I'm just sitting in my head saying, hey, you're getting tired, hey, you better stop, I won't listen, that's just how I am. If I talk it through with others, there's a little bit of social shame that says, hey, balance it out, man. So that's good. But yeah, that thing you said about that expectations. I mean, look, Scott and I both have our families that we're taking care of. We have our full-time jobs as seniors that has responsibility for our teams and the code bases and such. And then I do my side projects because I love them and that's what I can do. But then there's also this and we have the podcast, but there's this expectation of I should be writing blog articles, right? I should give more conference talks than the one a year that I do. I should go to these meetouts and hang out with the community and all. And I should be on Twitter more often. And I don't have the energy for that. And it's hard to acknowledge that is okay, Yeah. But it is. And I guess that's bringing it out in this sort of public forum. It is okay. You don't have to even do the side projects like I do. I literally do them because I need an outlet, and coding was my hobby before it was my career. So it still fits. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to do anything.
It's all about doing what makes you happy. I did a newsletter for the last year with my friend Louis, who's Mambalilu on CodePen and Twitter. But we did a lovely newsletter. We had so much fun doing it. I met him when I was doing a conference talk in Belgium. And we got a lot of Belgian beers, and then we got really excited about the fact that we were both nerding out about SVG and decided to do a newsletter. But the last couple of months, we just haven't really been feeling it because we've been quite busy and the initial excitement's kind of worn off. So we're calling it a day at a year so that we've got more space for other things. And I think that that's good, allowing yourself to just kind of do what makes you happy and follow the things that you're passionate about and not put external pressure on yourself for no reason.
Yeah, I think that's really good. It makes me worry a little bit for the open source contributors that have gotten sort of the GitHub payments or Patreons going. And this idea of you're now starting to get people that are expecting you to do these things. Mm-hmm. I think for some people that's great and it fits well. But, make sure I would like our audience to make sure that they understand themselves a certain degree before they go into these things as well. Just know yourself and don't place yourself in those situations.
At some point you're turning yourself into a business, though, if you're doing that kind of thing. You're making yourself a commodity, and you're making yourself or you're at least making something. You're making a product that you're having to put out, and that's going to drain you. I mean, if you're working full time and then you're producing a podcast or a newsletter, it's content that you have to take time to create. And so if you then move into charging people for that, then surely at that point you've got to see your day job start dropping off, or going part-time or whatever. If you're starting charging for people for things and raising an expectation, then something has to give. It just has to be balanced. It has to be. Like I also think that that you have to kind of, if you feel like it's time to let something go, then let it go. I mean, you've obviously made this decision, Cassie, to like just let the newsletter go, and I bet you still enjoy doing it, but like but some things become like a little bit of a burden where you don't want them to be a burden. So it is just knowing the right time to let it go. I think,
Yeah, holding on to things gently and knowing when it's time.
yeah, like enough's enough, and it's the right time. So just let it go. I mean, the other thing I would say, for in terms of like really combating burnout, is like work for good people, work for a good company. Like that's the main thing. Like, I would worry about people like getting into the industry that they would take anything that they could get, like, and so you would have like you'd perhaps be in a place where there'd be like high turnover of people, but really like, and I speak from a privileged position because I've been in the industry for a long time now, and so like I kind of feel like, well, I wouldn't work for a company unless they were good, unless they were like a well-run group, a well-run company. But it definitely makes a difference. And I see, like, especially in Barcelona, like there's so many tech companies, and they're all vying for developers. That it has to be. It's the other things. It's that retain staff. Like, so really, like, check out like the package that people are going to give you. You still have to be disciplined yourself, but like you should definitely look out for the people who you're actually working for.
Yeah.
Good. Well, that was perhaps not front-end specific, but good advice for our industry, I guess.
I think it's important. It's very important.
It is. It's important to talk about. And I do love that oftentimes we encounter talking about a particular topic in the front end is that the lessons that you take away from that are very applicable to the rest of your life too. You know, it's a good sign that we're focusing on something that is important and is growing us as human beings too.
Like my favorite takeaway that works for coding and also just general life is if you can't figure something out or if it's frustrating you, go away and make a cup of tea. And then come back later when you're less frustrated.
Yeah, it always works.
It always works.
Nap to go for a swim. Absolutely. Always works. Yeah. All right. So we're coming to that time of the show where we get into some of our more fun, less deep and philosophical moments. The first of those is our segment, True Hero. In this segment, we want to highlight a few true front-end heroes that are working across the planet and to thank them for all that they do. So, Cassie, this time you nominated one Sultan Akintunde. If you want to tell us a bit about why you're nominating them.
Yeah, I am. So, firstly, when you asked about who I would think of as a true hero in this field, I think we tend to look at ourselves, like developers tend to look at ourselves as heroes a little bit too much, I think. And I think at the end of the day, all we're really doing is moving rectangles around and pumping some JSON into things. So I think a lot of us need to maybe be taken down off the hero pedestal a little bit. But someone who I think is doing a really good job at just generally being a wonderful person is Sultan. He's kind of set up I think the company's called Laptops for Developers. It's a company called Dev Careers, I think, and they run something called Laptops for Developers, where they give out laptops to people in Africa who want to learn how to code. So I think that's wonderful. And I can give you a link if you can share it with your podcast in case people want to support it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why we want to highlight it, right? Our show being Front-End Heroes absolutely is a little tongue-in-cheek, and, you know, it's
not at all self-indulgence. It's not at all.
I know that.
There you go.
I wasn't criticizing your podcast name. I was criticizing the people in this industry.
100%. But there are real heroes that are out there that are really doing amazing things. And it's that idea as well of bring up the people around you, and if those can be people you've never met before, all the better. So Sultan, thank you so much for the work that you do again. Lastly here, any proper hero is a well-rounded one, and so we want to share some simple picks. Has it always been musical? We're evolving and growing. So Scott, what's the favorite thing you've been interested in lately?
Well, this month I have actually. Well, I can't have it as my pick because you had it as your pick last time. But Saint Vincent's album, I listened to it a few times now, and it is really amazing. Like nice. I really like it. It's not my favorite of hers, but it is really good. But that can't be my pick because you had it last time. So what did I read another book. I read 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Sorry, Cassie, this is like basically it's a major achievement to read a book when you're a parent, when you're a dad of like 2 young children. So I'm super happy because I read a book. But yeah, I read 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I cannot remember the name of the author, but it's been a super popular book. Really enjoyed it. And I would definitely recommend other people should read it.
Cool. Thanks for that. Cassie, how about you?
I've been, I can always tell when I've just been really deep in the freelance work and just work in general, because my music playlist becomes just basically Fortet on repeat. So that's pretty much what I've been listening to. It's like my version of lo-fi beats to chill, relax to, or whatever the YouTube playlist is that everyone listens to.
Do you have a favorite album?
Ooh,
that's a big question to just drop.
Yeah,
but it's because I actually know Fortet, and like that doesn't always happen with people. Just curious.
Favorite album? I don't know if I've got like a favorite album. I think I've got like favorite Fortet, like tracks in general. Like 2017 is one of my favorites.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. I mean, I got into them like probably Pink, like the album Pink or There Is Love in You. That was a good one. Like that hit back in 2010. And it was like, yeah, that was a particular time in my life. I don't know.
Have you seen them live?
Yeah. No, I've not seen it. I'm terrible at live shows. I never get to go. Yeah. Anyway, cool. We'll put that in there. I think that's a great choice. From my side, there's this album that surfaced called Liminal Migration by Steve Moore and Blue Tech. As with usual with my choices, I have no idea how to describe it, but I'll read this from the liner notes. This is the first release for our Ovoid Crafts sub-label, a showcase for forward-thinking, dance-oriented releases and an opportunity to pay homage to retro sci-fi in all its cheesy glory. Featuring sequential covers that reference 70s and 80s pulp novel covers in collaboration with different concept artists, Ovoid Crafts celebrates the more kinetic side of analog synth music, which is the foundation of Behind the Sky's oeuvre. Yeah, it's not kitschy. It's not. It's analog synth music. So it's this kind. I don't know. It's great for coding too. I really enjoy it, and it kind of just sprung on me. I listened to it once. I was like, that's okay, and then like all of a sudden, I'm listening to it on repeat constantly as I work. So
I've actually seen Blue Tech play.
Yeah,
before at Shambhala in Canada.
Yeah, I got into that. I love concept albums, so the whole Four Horsemen thing that they were doing was awesome. Good stuff. Okay, so it looks like that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you should like, heart, or star us in your podcatcher of choice. Reviews and ratings are how the fancy algorithms help people find our content, and the power to help is within you. If you have any questions or topics you want covered in our next episode, send a tweet to us at Heroes Frontend, and we'll add it to our list. And until next time, heroes, remember, with great front-end power comes great responsibility. See you next time.